Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Opportunities for Geoscientists in the Energy Transition Geothermal, hosted by the Geological Society. We are really pleased you could join us today. This session is part of a wider webinar series, which is bringing together leaders from academia, industry, and government to explore how geoscientists can help accelerate a responsible and investable energy transition. Before we begin, just a few quick housekeeping points from the events team. Today's session will run for around an hour and it will include time for Q&A at the end. Please use the Q&A function to post any questions for our speakers. We'll be collecting them throughout and aim to address as many as we can. If you missed our launch webinar, it's available to view via our Energy Transition Events page or on the YouTube Events Transition channel. This provides a great introduction to the series and sets the context for today's discussion. Thanks again for joining. And with that, I'll hand over to Baz, our fantastic energy transition theme lead, to say a bit more about the series and introduce our brilliant panel. Take it away, Baz.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Bas Bargan. This is the second webinar in the series. We have launched the webinar series in December with the introductory session on December the 8th. And today's session is on geothermal. And we have a regular once a month new session running through the rest of 2026. So in February, we'll be having wind and subsea cables. In March, green and natural hydrogen and helium exploration. April will be carbon capture and storage. Then we'll move into subsurface energy storage, critical minerals, nuclear, integrated energy, AI and machine learning in October, and we'll do a wrap up in November 2026. So I'd like to introduce our panelists for today. We originally did have 4 panelists on the session, but unfortunately, Lucy has had to step away today at the last minute. But we're very lucky to have Rory Dunphy from Geothermal Consulting, Build Geothermal. Sorry, I have Ellie McGuinness from WSP and David Walls from Townrock Energy. So first of all, Rory is an experienced geoscience and business manager with over 20 years in the energy industry, now dedicated to advancing Ireland's geothermal sector. He's the chair of the Geothermal Association of Ireland, and Rory brings a wealth of expertise in geomechanics, fractured reservoirs, deep well drilling and stimulation, and exploration management and stakeholder engagement. Through his consulting work with Build Geothermal and GeoServe, Rory supports the growth of Ireland's geothermal industry by providing geoscience, technical and project management experience. He previously led components of the Geological Survey of Ireland's National Geothermal Database project, helping to build the foundation for deep geothermal exploration nationwide. Ellie, as Technical Director and Geoscience Strategic Lead for WSP in the UK, has over 20 years of experience across the energy industry, from technical specialist to business leader in oil and gas and renewables. And she combines subsurface expertise with a passion for geothermal energy and its growing role in the energy transition. She's a regular speaker on geothermal and sustainability, and Ellie recently completed the University of Cambridge Judge Business School course in circular economy and sustainability strategies. She's an active member of the International Women's Forum, and she champions female leadership and is exploring board opportunities within the sustainability and net zero sectors. And lastly, David, he's the COO at Townrock Energy and is a senior geothermal geologist. He's been in the geothermal industry since 2017, obtaining valuable project experience through planning, drilling, installation and maintenance of boreholes and heating infrastructure. The primary driver of David's work is to contribute to decarbonisation of the heating and cooling sector in the UK. His expertise associated with mine water geothermal resources facilitates this, whilst addressing environmental risks associated with old coal mines. David now fills the role of COO of Rock Energy, overseeing the successful delivery of projects by working closely with the technical team to progress the uptake of geothermal energy. So, welcome to all the panelists and welcome to all the attendees. My name's Bas Bargan. I'm chairing the series and this webinar. I'd like to give a very short introduction to geothermal and where it sits in the energy transition, and then we're going to kick off the conversation with our panelists and find out what they've been up to and why they're doing what they're currently doing. So the series itself, the webinar series, it covers a broad range of topics. Obviously, starting with the oil and gas industry and solar and wind, and moving into green and natural hydrogen. And we'll be covering energy storage, carbon capture and storage, and critical minerals. But today's subject is about geothermal energy and heat. And as you can see in this zoom in of the variety of different topics that that geothermal energy covers, we'll be talking about a broad range of subsurface issues. It's when we talk about energy, we don't just talk about electricity. Heating and cooling actually account for nearly half of all energy usage, both residential and industrial. So many countries, including the UK and Ireland, have actually made significant steps to decarbonize the tip of the energy iceberg, which is electricity. But the hard bit is really what's below the tip of the iceberg: heating, cooling, and transport. And today's session is going to focus on the heating and cooling components and what opportunities there are for geoscientists to be able to help in that transition. There are a growing variety of geothermal systems underway in the UK and Ireland, and all of them require geoscience subsurface skills. You can see in this diagram, it varies from shallow geothermal, heating, cooling, and storage, all the way to deep geothermal power and storage. And all of these types of different projects are actually being executed or underway or are in operation in the UK and Ireland today. So I'd like to start off with Rory, who's over in Ireland, and I'd like to ask Rory to describe a little bit about where and what you studied when you started in your geoscience career and perhaps why you studied what you did.
Hey, thanks, Baz. Yeah, so I studied geology, the undergrad, and a research master's in Trinity College Dublin. As to why I ended up doing it, really, I was secondary school. My favorite subjects were maths and physics. So I was interested in science. There is no geology in the curriculum for secondary schools in Ireland, so geography was kind of the only exposure to it, which is very minimal. But fortunately, growing up in Wexford, which is the southeast coast of Ireland, I spent a lot of my happiest memories of childhood scrambling around rocks on the beaches here, and you can go from one side of the county to the other and go from Precambrian rocks all the way through up to Hookhead, where you've got lovely carboniferous limestone exposures. So that's really, when it came to choosing a subject, natural sciences was a good fit. It's broad entry, and was kind of stuck between whether to do physics or geology. And as soon as I got to university and experienced what university level physics is like, and then on the other side got to learn about some cool stuff about volcanoes and earthquakes, and certainly once the field trip component kicked in, it wasn't really a choice for me anymore. But the social side and the ability to practice your science, out around beautiful parts of Ireland, Scotland, and beyond. So that really was it for me. And then within that, developed an interest in through working in the French Alps as during a summer project in structural geology and fractures, and that kind of led on to doing some research in that area, looking at the impact of fractures on groundwater in Ireland, which lo and behold, 20 something years later, has come to be useful to me in terms of the very same rocks that we looked at for groundwater, we're looking at for geothermal now in Ireland.
Very good. So in a sense, you actually come full circle almost, Rory.
Yeah, 100% in many different ways. In having recently moved back to Ireland from having spent most of my career in Canada, yeah, really come back to where it all started.
How about you, Ellie? What was your background?
So is it kind of similar to Rory, which I didn't know previously, but I started doing maths and physics at St. Andrews, and I took a third module of physical geography, and that was really my first exposure to kind of plate tectonics and big scale deformation, and I was absolutely hooked. And then I met all the geologists and learned about their field trips and the fun they were having, and so I switched quite quickly. I'm really glad I did because I've had a really interesting career in geology. So I did my undergraduate thesis in the Outer Hebrides structural project. And then that was me completely hooked on structural geology. So I went to University of New Brunswick in Eastern Canada to do my PhD. And yeah, that was it. I stayed in Canada quite a long time before I moved back to the UK.
Very good. And yourself, David?
Yeah, thanks,
What was
Baz.
that you studied?
So I was an undergrad at University of Glasgow doing earth science. Before that, before I realized I wanted to do geology, I had been very fortunate to go on a field trip by the school, a high school, to Iceland. And so I had been completely enamored by all of the sights and less so the smells of geothermal that was in Iceland. And yeah, just blown away by the fact that they could melt the snow beneath their car park with the waste heat from a geothermal power plant. So I knew fairly early on that I was inspired by geothermal, and it took me an entire geology degree to really sort of refine those skills and choose the courses that were most applicable to that. I was again lucky enough to be able to do a PhD starting at Glasgow and finishing at University of Strathclyde, also in Glasgow, which looked at the mine water resources across Scotland. However, there was a brief moment where I considered doing one that was based in New Zealand, but decided that the control over what fieldwork and when in Scotland was what encouraged me to stick to Scotland. Yeah, I was able to conduct my own fieldwork across the Central Belt, which was great. So yeah, that was the brief history of how I got into geothermal. Fell in love as a high school student, and then made a lot of educational choices from then on to focus on that.
So maybe you could, David, just continue and just expand a little bit on what is the focus of your interest currently.
Yeah, so the post now at Townrock, and I've been with Townrock initially since 2017. Obviously, there was a slight hiatus for a PhD in the middle there. My expertise is in mine water geothermal, so building on the work that I produced through the PhD, which was understanding where is the best place in Scotland, then set a lot of the foundations for us to reach out to various stakeholders and engage them to build projects. And Townrock operate and maintain the only two commercial multi-megawatt mine water geothermal schemes in the UK. There are others which are also in the northeast of England. And so, yeah, the role now is to roll out mine water geothermal and other types of geothermal as best I can. I'm obviously a little bit biased towards that, given that I spent 4 years studying it. But the team covers the full spectrum of resource types that you can see there. And we have active projects that are ground source heat pump thermal storage solution, and we have ongoing research and rollout of projects that are much deeper than that as well.
And what about you, Ellie? What's your focus area?
So most of my career was spent in the oil and gas industry, the first 14, 15 years with different operators in Canada and Denmark. And then I moved to CGG, which is now Viridian. And I was very lucky in 2020 to be asked to take over or start a new geothermal team. So we worked on some global geothermal resource assessments for, major oil and gas operators. We also worked on multi-client projects with a similar scope, and then also geothermal lithium brines. So that was kind of how I first got into geothermal. And then my role at WSP is a little bit different. We're a global, international, massive scale engineering company. And I focus on more the business development, commercial, strategic side of things. So as a company, we offer from planning and consenting for projects, the subsurface component that we're all very familiar with, and then also on the top side component. So the facility engineering side of things, which is an area I'm starting to learn more. So yeah, as a company, we kind of try and do the end to end for our clients. And it's really, my colleagues that have the deep technical expertise and from the power generation to the district heating networks. So it's a really exciting area, and it's growing a lot. And as a big company, it's something that we're seeing more and more opportunities in right across the kind of the planning side, the conceptual side, right up to the execution side.
That sounds fascinating. Uh, Rory, what was your um, transition from the oil and gas into geothermal? What was that like? What was it? Was it a conscious choice you made?
Um, no, not really. It was, I had worked in Canada and Ireland in the oil and gas industry, up to 2020, and then left the oil industry, like many, not of necessarily my own choice. Initially in 2020 at the start of COVID when oil price went negative, and yeah, I had, after a stint in Ireland, I was back in Canada, and the time decided to take some time, in the middle of COVID. I had a 6-month-old baby. My wife said, just take a year off and think about what you want to do next. And got that advice from a number of different people just to see, where to go. And I wanted to do something different, having sort of been, let's say, moving up the management track in a large multinational oil company. 20 years ago, I probably would have been at a point where you wanted to go and work, let's say, as in a startup junior oil company or something like that. I kind of had grown tired of the corporate side of stuff, where oil and gas was for a number of different reasons. I didn't feel, being midway through my career, that, spending another 25 years in the oil and gas industry was something that I wanted to do. So initially what I did was, having a background in fractures and geomechanics, and worked a lot on unconventional reservoirs. Myself and a former colleague, figured we knew some stuff about that, and set up a consultancy initially aimed at that. But, really had only just started thinking about that when I got a random call from a contact in Ireland from when I was the regional manager for CNOC here, and just said, there's a tender open for geothermal services in Ireland. Looks like it might fit some of your skill set. And so I had a look at that and was like, you know what, it does. Put in a tender. Was fortunate enough to win it, and that really gave me a good window into the sector. And yeah, after a year or two of doing that, I sort of was trying to keep a foot in both industries, and then I was like, you know what, for me, geothermal is the way forward, and committed fully to it. Moved back to Ireland, and yeah, haven't thought about the oil and gas side of things since, and yeah, set up my own company here to do what the company name suggests, and try and build what I think is an absolutely critical sector for where the country is at.
So, what sort of clients do you have in terms of the demand in Ireland?
It's very much public sector. So I mean, I think the really what I'm trying to focus on at the moment is getting geothermal its fair, its seat at the table in renewable energy. We're fortunate in Ireland that we have, across all political parties, huge support for decarbonisation. And so really what it is making sure that all of the money, all of the funding, all of the opportunities that, over the last, however, 10, 15 years, as you said, it's been probably several billion gone into the building the wind industry in Ireland. And so what I'm trying to do with working with both the Department of Climate and Energy in Ireland, as well as, county councils, potentially district heating operators, is to understand and make sure that geothermal gets some of the supports that other sectors do, because when you're trying to do something new, when you're trying to displace fossil fuels, support is often needed, whether that's through grants and more so in Ireland as well, just understanding in data. We didn't have an onshore oil and gas industry to speak of in Ireland, and so when it comes to understanding deep geothermal potential, a lot of the work I've been doing over the last couple of years has been to really try and quantify that, because you can't sell something that you don't know the benefit of. So putting a lot of work in on a government contract to really understand what both shallow and deep resources we have and the economics of those, because what we're finding is, sometimes some of the larger consultancies, energy consultancies, they don't have a lot of geothermal expertise, and they do work on behalf of the government to look at, marginal abatement curves and things like that. But the proper economics, the proper valuation of geothermal is not going into those. So there's a lot of work to be done there to really educate and create the numbers on it. And then, the strategy really is that, if the public sector leads on that in Ireland, that more and more the private sector will start to jump on board. There are certainly lots of district heating operators now that are starting to spring up with upcoming legislation on heating in Ireland, and again, understanding how geothermal can supply those district heating networks, I see as a big opportunity going forward.
Thank you. So, district heating, David, that's also a area of your expertise. The mine water side of things is a fascinating subject, I find. What with, the whole coal industry, the whole history that the UK has had with coal, and now no longer actually having any coal in terms of generating electricity. The reuse of those old mine workings sounds like there's an enormous potential there.
There is, yeah. So a lot of the population density across the UK is corralled around these areas of mine workings, and we see that across the central belt of Scotland. We see that in the northeast of England. We see that in places like Birmingham and Nottingham, Manchester, etc., where they have a strong history of mining, is where the population centres grew, which now means that large areas of heat demand and cooling demand are sitting over mine workings. And so the challenge becomes, how do we access the warm water which is in the mine workings and have that be a backbone for district heat networks? And I think part of where the sector is quickly changing is a lot of research is going into using mine water geothermal, no longer necessarily just as a heat source or a cooling source, but actually as a thermal store. And it provides a thermal store on a scale which at the moment is not realized on the surface via water tanks, etc. But also it has the thermal buffer of being underground, and therefore it doesn't have the same losses as you would expect as a surface store. Plus, you can also, that means you can run it over seasonal scales rather than daily or weekly scales. So yes, mine water geothermal has an awesome heating potential, but I think where we're going to see it roll out and where the area of research, which is really interesting, is how does it have that key role in thermal storage for the district heat network.
Brilliant. Ellie, can you talk a little bit more about the transition that you made between going from oil and gas into geothermal? Did you find that you needed to acquire new skills, or how transferable were the skills that you had previously?
So I think on a technical aspect, my background structural geology, so understanding the subsurface in the fluid conduits and the heterogeneities and the geometries that we see in the subsurface, that's quite similar to oil and gas. Usually the data access we have in oil and gas is a lot better than in geothermal. So I think from having a kind of subsurface structural background, it's a lot of the same skills that you need, and you can apply it in the same way. It's a very different business. Obviously, oil and gas is a very high value product. There's a lot of very big players on the industry side of things. So learning about the geothermal business was really interesting for me. Um, and when we say geothermal, there's lots of different technologies, right? As you have on your slide. So it's similar to oil and gas. You've got, you know, deep offshore reservoirs, or you've got shale gas, or they takes different technology. There's different commercial margins on the projects, and they're used in different circumstances. So just learning from the kind of that campus scale geothermal to the residential heating to the forge exciting EGS projects that are, really in the R&D exciting side of things. And then when I was at Viridian, we also were working on offshore geothermal, so extended continent oceanic crust. And I believe that project is still ongoing since I've left. So it's just such an exciting area from the business side and the different margins, and then to the the science of it. It's not like a one geothermal. It doesn't fit nicely into one box. It's evolving all the time, and new players, new startups are coming in. There's global projects like Project Inner Space, which is basically evaluating the potential globally and really trying to kickstart geothermal in lots of parts of the world where it hasn't been a focus. So yeah, it's a continually evolving space, and so it takes a bit of work to keep up to date with all the different projects that are going on.
And do you find that the client base that WSP is looking after, is that also like Rory has mostly public sector, or are you finding it also in the private sector?
Definitely in the private sector as well. Companies have to decarbonize their assets. So there's the energy security side of things, having your own geothermal power on site that you control. That's very valuable for a lot of clients. Everyone has their decarbonization targets, and they look differently depending on where you are in the world. So yeah, so it's a mix. I think for the private clients, it's a mix of new builds that have geothermal already built into them, or existing infrastructure that's being retrofitted. So I think there's the public sector side of things, and then there's a private sector, and then sometimes we see that overlap. So it's a big range of different opportunities, and with we're in the energy addition phase now with all the data centers and AI. We our projections from 5 years ago of how much energy we were going to need, they're way off now. Like we're just so much more energy is required than we'd anticipated. So yeah, I think a lot of private clients are looking to secure that energy themselves.
Very good. And so are you seeing growth in that sector?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I mean, it's still slow. Um, it's still very niche. Geothermal is very niche compared to offshore wind, which we're also involved in. And some of the investments that we're seeing in hydrogen, they're massive scale. So yeah, it's still a very niche area. But I think, as you said in your introduction, it's that decarbonizing heat. certainly in the UK, that's really where we can make a difference with our carbon emissions.
Thank you, Ellie. David, I'd like to come back to you. Could you maybe talk a little bit more about the projects that Tanrock operate in terms of, you said that there was two areas that you've already got mine, water, energy sort of projects actually underway and generating heat
Yeah, of
and
course.
cooling.
So just to sort of zoom out for a second, we have clients typically who are public sector, local authorities, perhaps. We would have private clients as well. We would have potentially large energy companies that are, delivering district heat network projects across big cities in the UK. And they'll come to us, and our typical first offering is just to do an appraisal of everything that is available to them, quite unbiasedly. And we offer that specialist to look at all the geothermal solutions which they could have alongside air source heat pumps, river source heat pumps, any addition they could get from solar PV or solar thermal, for example. And most of them just wants to cut through the noise and just get a bit of clarity on what solution could suit their site best. So, for example, a project that we designed and built is in Glasgow for an arts venue called SWG3, and it has a large cooling demand from the nightclub space and a fairly
Oh,
large heating demand because it has a cafe, it has art venues, it has conference spaces, for example. And so the solution there was to create a kind of amalgamation of the top two, sorry, the top left two in this figure, ground source heat pump, but also with thermal storage. So for the venue there, we've got 12 boreholes, each to 200 meters. And what happens now is on a night where there's a particularly hot and sweaty gig, a lot of thermal energy gets stored because those club cores need to be cooled down. That waste heat gets captured, it gets transferred into the boreholes, and it heats up the rock mass underneath the beer garden and therefore cools down the venue. And then the next day, say the next day or the next week or the next month, when the venue just needs heating for the conference space or the cafe, the system can be flipped in reverse. So you can put cold water down the boreholes, you can draw in that heat from the rock mass, and you can provide heating to the venue. And so that's allowed us to disconnect the gas boilers there, and actually that runs off heat pumps that are in a little shipping container at the back of the venue. So yeah, the shared loop or the ground source heat pump example from that. That sort of matches our feasibility studies and our delivery project. But then at the end of the project delivery, we offer operation and maintenance services. And so that's what we're running down in the northeast of England for the two Manchester mine water geothermal schemes. And they've got warehouses that require climate controlled storage for confectionery and wine. And around 2015 to 2017, they drilled mine water boreholes into the mine workings beneath them, which are somewhere between 100 and 150 meters below ground level. And since then, there have been some iterations. It was obviously a very pioneering project, and it was delivered by a company who were, sort of breaking ground in the UK. And so there have been a lot of lessons learned from those projects, which have then gone to fed into the huge success of Gateshead Energy Scheme, which was delivered by Gateshead Council, sorry. And there have been other progress, the likes of the UK Geos scheme and other mine water geothermal schemes across the UK. Nowadays that we operate and maintain it, we're in charge of doing things like checking the operational water levels, the temperature, the chemistry, reporting to the EA and the Mining Remediation Authority. We also optimize the system by drilling a new abstraction borehole to 265 meters into a different coal seam, which awarded us with higher temperature water, slightly better suited water chemistry, and overall just made the heating system a bit more efficient. So yeah, there's a lot going on in the operation maintenance space, and it's something that Tanrock have expertise to do to kind of maintain as best we can the systems that get deployed over the next coming years. It was one of the highlighted challenges with a very early mine scheme in Glasgow, actually, which was built in 1999 or 2000. and ran for 20 years without anyone really looking after it properly, but eventually succumbed to the burden of just cumulative maintenance challenges. And so that's a kind of problem we've tried to solve is we can be the people who are in charge of just overseeing all the different aspects, whether that's boreholes or permitting or plant room upkeep, for example, and we stay on top of it, and that helps us keep these projects running for longer.
So is companies like Tanrock, are they also experiencing growth in the activity set that they're focused on?
Yeah, so we have very strong technical team. We have thus far primarily been responsive to contracts that come in. So people who are interested in geothermal come reach out to us, much like Rory, and put in tender responses, etc. So we are looking to also do the science communication piece and try and teach more people that geothermal is an opportunity out there, and they don't have to just decarbonize by switching over to air source heat pumps because naturally there's a lot of benefits that could be had with the efficiency, the less strain on the grid, for example. And so, yeah, we've got a big push to try and increase the number of people who are aware of geothermal and therefore would consider it for their site. But also, in parallel to that, we've seen more and more projects that come out naturally from legwork that other companies have been doing in and convincing local authorities or district heat network operators to look into it as well.
So so what sort of opportunities exist for the geoscientists to actually join companies like Townrock or actually participate in the energy transition via geothermal?
So the sort of roles that we have within Rock for geoscientists just now are a lot of resource appraisal work, which involves, geological screening, a lot of hydrogeology, whether that's sort of desk-based hydrogeology or actually on-site delivering pump tests, interpreting the results of those, understanding the impact of water chemistry, working closely with our engineers to optimize the plant room components to make the most of what the geothermal waters have to offer. Other than that, it's a lot of sort of project management. It's a lot of potentially drilling supervision and coordinating various subcontractors or stakeholders to delivering a project and overseeing a project from that first phase, what we call our scope phase, where we have to have a really broad understanding of the geological parameters that influence each one of these different resource types, but equally having an understanding of the background engineering and the inner workings of air source heat pumps, river flow heat pumps, for example, the other low carbon heating opportunities that aren't geothermal. And so yeah, it's a really fun mix of having a broad oversight of all the different resources, but then we have people who are incredibly specific at what they do and have like really detailed fracture analysis and fracture modeling in granites, for example, to understand what those deeper geothermal options might include.
Thank you, David. That's really fascinating. Ellie, I can see you nodding away. Could you maybe what sort of advice would you give to geoscientists who are actually wishing to participate in the energy transition via, geothermal?
So I think it is a challenging industry right now. There's a limited number of jobs, and that's just the reality we're in at this time. But I think there's lots of things that early career or people that are still in university can do to start to target their skill sets towards geothermal. Um, so volunteering is a great way to kind of build your network. So looking for opportunities. I know early in my career, I used to volunteer at conferences because I couldn't afford to have the registration costs. So I would volunteer and support the conference. There's, different committees that you can be involved in. As far as kind of learning more, there's a lot of material out there online as well. So it's just because there isn't an opportunity available right now, it doesn't mean that you can't prepare yourself so that, when things do pick up or when you do identify a role that you'd be interested in, you've got a little bit of, you know, that edge over some other people who might not have been as proactive as you have to learn more. Um, I think away from the technical side, also just learning about the industry, learning about the different options that clients can have, different kinds of geothermal projects. I use Think Geoenergy newsletter. It has all the industry news from around the world. It's free. You can just sign up for it. It's a great resource. So yeah, so I think it's obviously use your network, look for opportunities, but just because there isn't an opportunity right now doesn't mean you can't prepare yourself for when that comes up. And let people know what you're interested in. If you're working in an energy company or an engineering company, find out what they're doing for geothermal. Find out if they even thought about it, because perhaps there's an opportunity for you to kind of craft your own role, or when something comes up, that people know that that's your passion and that's what you're interested in. So yeah, it might not be easy, but if it's something you're really passionate about, there's ways to keep progressing slowly so that you're ready when that opportunity does come up.
I think that's just to add to what Ellie's saying, and I totally agree, is there are so many transferable skills in geoscience jobs that exist elsewhere. For example, if you work in geotech, it's so helpful to have just a working understanding of how drilling works. And then if you work in water resources management, for example, then hydrogeology skills are incredibly valuable in the geothermal world as well. So yeah, you can totally embellish your skill set for geothermal without necessarily having either an understanding of the geothermal industry, or yeah, you can still do it in parallel to that. And then it just becomes a case of applying what you've already spent years learning and putting that towards a geothermal application.
And Rory, how about yourself? Just thinking a bit more globally, where do you see the growth in geothermal opportunities for people? Do they need to be mobile and moving from country to country, or are there opportunities locally where you are?
Yeah, I mean, I think both really. Come back to a point Ellie made earlier, that geothermal is a very different business to something like oil and gas or mining. It's heat is a utility, not a commodity that gets produced in one area and shipped over a long distance to somewhere else. I'm sure someone will find some example to correct me on this, but as far as I know, everywhere in the world that you go, as you go down in the earth, it gets hotter, and therefore geothermal is everywhere. And I think this diagram that's in front of us really communicates what you're doing as a geoscientist in geothermal. Is you're exploring for the right technology to extract the heat for a specific end use in an economic fashion. And so therefore, while, there might be places like, Indonesia and New Zealand where you've got, the Iceland, the high temperature electricity generation, if that's the geology that interests you, then, those are the places to go for it. But if you're just interested in making a difference in terms of decarbonisation, right here in Ireland and in the UK, the shallow geothermal sector, I think, has to be a workhorse of decarbonising heating and cooling for the no other reason than just the impact on grid, as David said, compared to air source heat pumps. So if you Google the top 10 geothermal energy produced in the world, pretty much every continent in the world is covered. Maybe not South America, but that's going to change. I'm sure there are plants in Chile. So, I think it'll offer the opportunity to people to go work elsewhere. But I think hopefully 5 years' time, county councils, local authorities are maybe going to have a need for a geothermal specialist on staff to help with decarbonising their housing stock, or the energy storage piece with respect to understanding wastewater and how to use that as part of integrated district heating systems. And again, really understanding it as a different business. It's not necessarily again, like oil and gas, where you have a developer, middle person, where Ellie mentioned data centers, which is a huge sector in Ireland, and so the using waste heat from data centers for district heating. There's an opportunity for thermal storage there, and to balance, which is again going to be something that's probably even mandated going forward. So there should be a lot of opportunities locally as well as internationally, I think. So.
And I don't know enough about the, the rocks in Ireland, but are there any opportunities for lithium extraction from geothermal brines in Ireland coming up?
It's not something that has been looked at hugely, but under the European Union Critical Raw Materials Act, it's something that will be looked at more and more. Where obviously there's a keen eye on some of the stuff that's going on in Cornwall. We've slightly different granites here, but to Ellie's point about energy security with the market for data centers in Ireland. We're hopeful at some point that we might see some deep drilling in some of the granites around Dublin to look at that. But it's not the number one priority. I think it's we're looking at really the low hanging fruit of we haven't got a single deep geothermal sort of system on the go yet, and so we've done a lot of work on 3D modeling, and we're currently planning an urban seismic acquisition study, which is again, these are the things where in terms of transferable skills, I've been involved in a lot of onshore seismic acquisition. Doing it in the centre of a Viking town like Dublin, it presents a whole new different set of operational and stakeholder challenges, which is again another key difference to doing something out in the wilds of Canada. So I think in Ireland, lithium is not number one at the moment. I think it's trying to establish if it's a viable technology for heating and cooling at depth, and really we know shallow geothermal is a viable technology. It's just a matter of getting the word out on it and getting enough investment in it that people can see it, touch it, and that's really what gets people to commit to these things. Is when the Trinity College Dublin in Ireland here is got a geothermal system installed in a building from 1700, and it not retrofitted to the nth degree. And anybody who's come in to the underground plant room on that beneath one of the beautiful squares in Trinity College, if you're familiar with it, is blown away by I'm heating an ancient building with no noise, no visual aspects, and once they see that, they go, okay, I get it.
Fantastic. So there's even some opportunities for geophysicists out there to help impact the geothermal energy.
100%. I think as Ellie said, I mean, I background in geomechanics and fractures. Certainly, the reservoir types we have in not just in Ireland and the UK, but across Europe. Fractured carbonates are a huge untapped resource for geothermal, and with that comes the assessment of induced seismicity and things like that. So definitely geophysics in understanding both stress state and the nature of faults and fault permeability is going to be a huge part of that. And again, the trick with all this is you don't necessarily have the resources that you have available to you in an oil and gas company in terms of for data acquisition. But there's a lot of cool stuff being done. Switzerland at the moment have been doing a bunch of 3D surveys that we've been chatting to them about in Geneva and Luzerne, and yeah, it's different ways of doing things, and that's the fun stuff. Certainly for me, in moving in a different direction. You almost want to be. I like working on things where you're writing the manual as you're doing them, and I think there's a lot of that going on in geothermal, while also a sector that's been there for 100 years, and there's a huge amount of expertise in Europe already doing these type of projects that you can tap into, and I think that's important to recognise. There's a lot of the IEA released a report on geothermal talking about the transferability between oil and gas and geothermal, and but yes, lots of these new technologies are going to have an impact, but there is a lot of expertise there already. That's it's the opposite. We need to learn from people who are doing it for the last couple of decades, rather than thinking that we're coming with all the answers.
Fantastic. Well, I can feel the enthusiasm oozing out of the screen from all three of you. It's been really good to talk to you. I want to just give the opportunity, given that we've got about 10 minutes left, for some potential questions from the audience. I don't know, Amelia, are you able to enlighten us what sort of questions are out there?
Yeah. So we've had a couple of questions, some of which I think we've covered off. So I would say one from so we've got, I would like to know what the scene looks like for earth scientists with entrepreneurial ambitions. Is it easy to break onto the scene as a startup company, or has the industry been moved on already by all the big actors?
Uh, no, it hasn't been moved on. I think would be my answer to that. Like, I think, yeah, you have to make your own market. I think is the thing, and David, I think hinted at that. Everybody needs to sell geothermal, and everybody needs to grow the pie, and then your own slice of it grows. So I think no, if you're of an entrepreneurial mindset, I think now is 100% the time to jump into geothermal, because it is such a small share of renewables at the moment. But when you come to understand it, you understand how impactful and important it can be to energy security, grid resilience, and things like that. So it should only be going one way.
Thank you.
David, I think you might have some to add to that. I think if I remember correctly from the Town Rock website, there's 25% estimated houses in the UK are actually above disused mine workings. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I think Rory's captured really nicely, and Rory I think is a fantastic place to do exactly that, coming from a background and having transferable skills from a separate career. And so I think, for example, our founder set up a geothermal company straight out of university, with some very well experienced mentors, and I think whilst it was challenging, it's obviously proved successful in the long term. So I think there's a case to be made for getting some experience somewhere else, whether that's transferable skills from a different industry or something like that, and then getting involved in geothermal, or finding a way to educate yourself and get a good understanding and experience on the move pretty sharpish, because yes, there are increasing number of players in this field, and therefore, like Rory was saying, we're getting expertise sort of in-fed from other nations that have been doing this for a longer time. So yes, it's a good idea, but you have to have, you know, find resources that will help you out to get there.
Got a couple of early careers questions. So one question, I'm a geology student. Do you think a geotechnic degree or resource exploration degree is better suited for a career in geothermal?
Yeah.
Ali, what do you think?
Sure, I'll go for this one. I think if you have a passion for one or the other, go with your passion. You can pick up skills as you go through your career. I've done all kinds of different things. In my career, I'm working offshore wind and hydrogen and CCS, and like a career can be a long time, and the markets change, your interests change, opportunities come and go. So if you've got a passion for one or the other, I would go for that. Um, I think you can make it work either way. Both skill sets are needed. So, don't discount one or the other. And you can do learning on your own, right? So you can look for those crossover points, and you can educate yourself in whichever field you didn't end up moving into. So if you have a passion in the geoscience science space, then yeah, follow that, because that's is having that internal energy that will drive you throughout your career.
Just to add to that maybe as well, I think the sort of the cross-disciplinary aspect for geothermal it's important in any sector, but especially when you get into the shallow geothermal piece. If you have the opportunity to really get into heat pumps and really get into building design, and understanding the linkage between all of those as part of an undergraduate or a postgraduate, I think that's a huge win, because I think you can really understand how you can use geoscience better when you really understand how the whole system works in terms of these heat pump systems, and I think that becomes a big part of trying to communicate to people why it works so well.
Thank you. questions are coming in fast. One more question. As a geoenergy student, I've already applied for a PhD position to work on the Edinburgh Geo Battery. Are there any other opportunities in terms of work or research to repurpose mine works for geothermal energy? Finding it a little tricky to know where to start.
David, I think that one might come to start with you again.
Yeah, I think I can only really comment on the ones that Tanrock are partnered in, and but there are, there's researchers across a lot of different universities across the UK that have a mine water focus. Definitely Glasgow, Strathclyde, Heriot Watt, Edinburgh. Seen some less familiar with the English universities, but there's definitely some in Durham, obviously, and yeah, I remember seeing some other like the UKGS, which is the UK Geothermal Symposium, presented from other universities in the kind of coal fields around, I want to say Stoke or Nottingham or places like that. So yeah, I mean that would be my first port of call, and that's how I got my PhD, with just being pointed in the direction of an academic, a researcher who was in charge of this kind of research group, and just inquiring with them. So yeah, find yourself a list of the researchers in charge of those groups, and just yeah, send them an email.
Great, thank you. There's quite a few coming in. I'm just gonna did those that studied or did PhDs find that it was a good way into the sector, or would going straight into an industry position be more valuable?
So
Ellie,
I
Hot
did a
potato.
PhD because I was going to go into academia, and I changed my mind very quickly. I think PhDs are really valuable, but they are a big commitment. They're a big time commitment, and if I think having a master's is a bridge. If you can find a master's that is, on a practical, actual project, where you can get that kind of the operational awareness, make those industry connections. Yeah, I think there's a lot of different paths that you can take, and we all, as we get on in our career, our paths become increasingly windy, and sometimes you don't make the decision on what path you're going to take. So yeah, I think it's always good just to kind of map out the pros and the cons in your own mind as to if I go in this route, what would I perhaps be stepping away from as opposed to going straight into a job opportunity. I mean, if you're an undergrad, just finish your undergraduate and you can find a job, then you can always go and do a PhD later. There's not a lot of, sorry, I don't mean to sound like the doomsayer, but there's not an awful lot of positions for the number of people that have a passion. So yeah, just take some time and kind of think about what you want out of it. And sometimes you have to take a jump into something, and yeah, just do your best, make the best decision at the time, right?
Great, thank you. A lot of people, just for anyone joining us, there's quite a few people that are sharing information in the chat, so do have a look through that as well. Sorry, let me give you one or two more and then we'll go. I'm a geology student finishing my master's in Geneva. Would you say there are job opportunities for recent graduated students in the industry in Europe? What would be your recommendation for applying to these jobs?
I mean, in Europe in general, there's definitely some tailwinds behind, geothermal. There's a lot of activity in Germany at the moment, a lot of activity in Switzerland, Hungary, Croatia, Poland, or all of those are putting schemes in place to encourage development. Denmark, another one. So there's definitely going to get a point where I think the existing capacity of a lot of the companies working on it is going to get stretched. But again, it's as Ellie was saying. I think you have to find those opportunities by putting the legwork in, by going to conferences, by establishing what skill sets are needed, and how to portray yourself in that. And I don't think it's going to be a situation where you're going to see a lot of postings on LinkedIn or anything like that you apply for. So I think it's about understanding the market, where the opportunities are getting off the ground now, and what type of help that they need. And again, speaking certainly from my role in the Geothermal Association of Ireland, volunteers are always welcome to help, and it's a good way of creating the connections.
Great. Thank you. I think we are probably ready to wrap up. So I'll hand over to Baz to bring it all together.
Well, I'd like to just say thank you very much to Rory, Ellie, and David. It's been a fascinating conversation. I've learned a lot as well today. So it's been really, really good to have you guys pass on your expertise and your knowledge and your advice to people who are wishing to join your industry. So I'd just like to say thank you very much for your time. And I'll hand back to Amelia just to close the session.
Great. Yeah, thank you to Baz as well for leading this series and sharing today, and to all of you brilliant speakers for all your expertise, time, and sharing your insights. We are at the Society super grateful for all of your support. And thanks as well to everyone who joined us and contributed questions, shared resources. It's been really great to see such strong engagement. Baz has just shared the QR code. You can scan this to explore all upcoming Geological Society events and resources under our energy transition strategic theme, including past webinar recordings. We will aim to update this and upload this as well as soon as possible. And we look forward to seeing you again. The next webinar will be on the 24th of February, and this will be looking at wind and subsea cables. So yeah, have a lovely rest of the day and see you in February. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.